No ride in Disneyland's history is wrapped in more controversy than the one built on the simple equation: fear minus death equals fun. Today we're peeling back the layers on its daring design, groundbreaking construction, and the untold stories that made an icon: Splash Mountain. Long before Splash Mountain was even a concept, Disneyland had an attraction called America Sings. But as America Sings prepared to close its doors, those animatronic characters faced an uncertain future. That's when Imagineer Tony Baxter had a stroke of genius. Why not give those beloved critters a brand new home and a new attraction? Now, this idea not only saved the America Sings characters, but also tied Splash Mountain to Disneyland's rich history. But now, once again, with changes on the horizon, will these animatronics survive and remain a part of Disneyland's rich history? Splash Mountain didn't just add a new ride, it completely changed the thrill level at Disneyland. And its arrival meant pushing the boundaries of design, forcing Imagineers to rethink how to fit a massive, high-speed attraction into the park's already crowded existing layout. For starters, the train tracks for the Disneyland Railroad had to be moved, and an underground show building was created, and we'll get to that in a bit. And even the park's skyline was reshaped to make room for a massive new mountain. Bricky here. Today we're diving into the story behind Splash Mountain and covering the rise and fall of Disney's most controversial attraction. Friends, you never know when creativity is going to strike you. How do you take a closing attraction, a traffic jam, and turn those two situations into one of Disneyland's most iconic rides? Back in the mid-1980s, Imagineer Tony Baxter was facing two problems: the closure of America Sings and the park's need for a thrilling new attraction. It wasn't until one frustrating drive down the Santa Ana freeway that he found his solution. So what was it about that traffic jam that sparked the idea of Splash Mountain? Well, let's go back to where it all started. In the 1980s, Disneyland's Dick Nunes, head of park operations, wanted a water flume ride that could compete with Knott's Berry Farm's popular Timber Mountain. But Imagineer Tony Baxter knew that just copying their idea wouldn't cut it. It wouldn't meet the Disneyland standard. Disneyland needed something that had that special Disney touch. Baxter, along with fellow Imagineers Bruce Gordon and John D. Stone, began brainstorming ideas for a future attraction that would fit Disneyland's unique blend of storytelling, but adding in thrills. So one day, stuck in traffic on the Santa Ana freeway, Tony Baxter must have envisioned all the cars around him as a log jam, because this is where he had his creative breakthrough. What if they took the animatronics from America Sings and used them in a brand new attraction, a log flume ride, filled with music, characters, and a splashy finale? This was the moment that set everything in motion, transforming a simple ride concept into what would become Splash Mountain. And if you think about it, Baxter's breakthrough idea, it was simple, but it was also brilliant. He knew that all the critters at America Sings and their lively personalities could bring the ride to life in a way that only Disney could. Excited about the idea, Baxter pitched it to the Imagineering team, and it didn't take long for them to see its potential. In fact, Bruce Gordon, one of the Imagineers that worked on the project, recalled, "Tony came up with the idea, and by the end of the very first day, we all knew what the show was going to be." After all, this was the creative idea that could possibly turn into Splash Mountain, combining classic Disney storytelling with a thrilling new experience, something that they hadn't really done at this moment. And this would all work if the Imagineers could convince management. The next step was the big pitch to Disney's CEO, Michael Eisner. And in September 29th of 1984, Tony Baxter knew this was probably going to be a tough sell, because Song of the South had been re-released in theaters just a few years earlier in 1980, but it was still controversial and relatively an obscure Disney film. Baxter was worried that basing a ride on this movie might not appeal to Eisner, who was new to Disney and looking for fresh, exciting projects. Baxter knew he had to convince Eisner that this ride wasn't just another log flume. It was an experience that would be filled with Disney magic. So during the pitch, he deliberately avoided focusing on the storyline of Song of the South. Instead, Baxter sold him on the ride's technical specs. He promised this will be the steepest and highest flume ride ever built. Well, when Eisner heard that, he perked up. He caught his interest and he said, "Can you guarantee me it will be the longest and steepest and highest?" That was his request, and Baxter said that he could. And then came the crucial moment. Sitting next to Eisner was his teenage son, Breck, who was a huge influence on Eisner and his decisions with Disney. Breck had just heard the pitch for Star Tours earlier that day, and with excitement in his voice, he told his dad, Eisner, "This is even better." And that sold Michael Eisner. Splash Mountain is here, so a rich guy could impress his son. Love it. And as silly as it sounds, this was a turning point. With Breck's excitement and Eisner's interest, Baxter's vision for Splash Mountain took a huge step forward. It went from blue sky to the beginning stages of reality.
Longest flume ride ever built in a theme park. It will include one of the world's tallest and steepest drops, 52.5 feet. It's another example of the constant effort to bring new vitality to Disneyland. I expect its popularity will rival that of our other recent attractions, Captain EO and Star Tours.
Even though a corporate guy, Eisner saw Disneyland as an experimental ground, a testing lab for new attractions that could later be translated to other Disney parks around the world. You see, Eisner, he was all about pushing the boundaries of creativity and innovation. He never lost sight of Disney's core mission to entertain and bring joy to guests. Eisner wanted every new experience to capture that magic and focus on the brighter side of things, keeping Disneyland a place of fun and of imagination. So when Baxter pitched Splash Mountain, Eisner saw it as an opportunity to blend thrilling innovation with Disney's rich storytelling tradition, a perfect fit for his vision of Disneyland's future. Even though Eisner did have an idea for the future, he still was a suit at heart. Because even though Eisner's heart was in the right place when it came to Disneyland, he was still a suit and not a creative. And nothing illustrates this better than his idea for naming the attraction. As the design for the new flume ride was taking shape, Eisner had one key demand. It needed to be called Splash. And it had nothing to do with the big drop. Why Splash? Eisner wanted to create synergy with the 1984 movie Splash, starring Daryl Hannah. In fact, he even suggested putting a mermaid at the end of the ride to tie it in with the film. This is a real story. Management, oh, their creative ideas. Well, Tony Baxter and his fellow crew of Imagineers knew the idea was, to put it kindly, just dumb. But sometimes you gotta find a way to make the boss happy. They were willing to be flexible with the name, but they drew a hard line at a mermaid being attached to the ride. Despite their reservations, the team went with it, and the name Splash Mountain was eventually born. Originally, Baxter had a few different names in mind, including Zippity Dee River Run, or simply Zippity Doo Dah. But in hindsight, he later admitted how boring that would have been. Splash Mountain has since become an iconic name that perfectly captures the ride's thrilling spirit. Getting the green light on the name is just the beginning of this story. As they move forward, Imagineers faced an even bigger challenge: how to adapt Song of the South into a thrilling, family-friendly adventure. So how exactly did they transform the risky concept into one of the park's most beloved attractions? Let's break down the creative process and look at the lessons of design within constraint when bringing the concept of Splash Mountain into reality. Building Splash Mountain wasn't just about creating another thrill ride. It was about seamlessly integrating a towering mountain into Disneyland's existing landscape. Unlike other Disney parks, Disneyland has a limited footprint, so the team had to get creative. They used every trick in the book to make sure Splash Mountain would fit perfectly into the park without overwhelming its surroundings. For starters, they built much of the ride's structure underground to prevent it from dwarfing iconic landmarks like Sleeping Beauty Castle and the Matterhorn. The underground portion allowed them to hide the bulk of the ride while creating the illusion of a natural mountainside, blending it seamlessly into critter country, which was then bear country, and now is bayou country. We'll get to all that in a bit. And then came the challenge of moving the railroad tracks. The Disneyland Railroad had been a fixture of the park since its opening day, and rerouting it was no small feat. They shifted the tracks further to the west to carve out enough space for Splash Mountain's footprint. To make this change, they carefully reshaped all of the terrain around the train, ensuring that the railroad would still provide guests with scenic views. But now it included a view inside of Disneyland's newest mountain. And to protect the park's skyline from being interrupted by the surrounding city, they used Splash Mountain's rocky facade to reinforce the Disneyland berm and sightlines. Splash Mountain is positioned to block out downtown Disney and the Disneyland Hotel. So integrating Splash Mountain was a masterclass in park design, showcasing how Disney Imagineers could work within tight constraints to make something feel like it had always been a part of Disneyland. Finding a home for Splash Mountain wasn't just a matter of picking an empty spot. It was about balancing the park's design and flow. Because at this time, this area was known as Bear Country, a quiet corner of the park that had little draw to guests. This created a lopsided flow of foot traffic around Disneyland. So by adding Splash Mountain here, Imagineers saw a way to bring balance to the park. But up until this point, the western half had only had one mountain, Big Thunder Mountain, while the eastern side had both Matterhorn and Space Mountain. With the new attraction renaming and retheming Bear Country, it became a visual counterpart to Big Thunder Mountain, drawing guests to the western half of the park and creating symmetry in Disney's design layout. But balance wasn't just about guest flow. Splash Mountain's facade was designed to blend in seamlessly with the rugged landscape that was known as Frontierland, while standing out as a new iconic structure. Its cascading waterfalls and rustic rockwork were intended to echo natural formations, integrating it into the park's overall aesthetic without overshadowing the nearby attractions. Once again, balance was key. As part of the park's berm, Splash Mountain helped maintain the feeling of isolation from the outside world. From inside Disneyland, guests would be greeted with the sight of a mountain, not the cityscape that lied beyond. And even today, it remains one of the most tranquil corners of Disneyland. When it came to making Splash Mountain a true standout, height was key. At 87 feet tall, it became the fourth largest structure inside of Disneyland. For the comparison, the Matterhorn stands 147 feet, Space Mountain 118 feet, and Big Thunder Mountain at 104 feet. And Splash Mountain is that tall with a massive amount of it being built into the ground to avoid it from overshadowing its neighbors. But the real thrill lies in Splash Mountain's mechanics. The attraction features a 47-degree plunge that sends logs down a 52-foot drop at 40 miles per hour. When it opened in 1989, it was the longest water flume chute in the world and instantly made Splash Mountain the fastest ride at Disneyland. I'm pretty sure it still holds that record today. I think Radiator Racers only goes like 30 miles an hour. Hey friends, if you're enjoying today's video about the rise and fall of Splash Mountain, make sure you subscribe to Hey Bricky. It's the easiest, freest way to make sure I keep showing up with 3 videos every week. I appreciate you for signing up to Hey Bricky. Now back to today's video. I'm so glad you showed up. And as the logs crest the hill, guests get a very brief glimpse at the stunning Orange County skyline to the east. You can see the mountains if you look. But let's be real, most fans are too focused on the upcoming drop to fully appreciate that iconic view. The Imagineers intended it that way, building anticipation before that heart-pounding descent into the Briar Patch. The speed and thrill of the drop weren't just for show. They also added to the ride's reputation as an icon within the park. The ride's mechanics were also carefully engineered to create the perfect mix of thrill and safety. One example of this is the controlled entry to the waterfall after the drop. The Imagineers used adjustable rails to ensure the logs made the perfect splash, enough to thrill guests, without drenching them completely. This kind of attention to detail is what makes Splash Mountain more than just a ride. It's a full sensory experience that brought guests back time and time again. A very high re-rideability because every fall is a little bit different than the last. Splash Mountain's layout was a marvel of engineering, cleverly contained within two massive show buildings. The first building faced West Street, housing some of the ride's most iconic scenes, including the Brer Rabbit's encounters with the Laughing Place Adventure. The second building sat beneath the 8-story mountain, concealing the grand finale drop and the cinematic zippity-doo-dah scene. Connecting these two buildings was an ingenious idea, and it used a tunnel called the Burrows. The Burrows acted as a passageway for the logs, giving guests the impression that they were traveling through an expansive landscape, even though they were cleverly being guided between two separate structures. This design not only allowed Imagineers to create different themed environments within the ride, but it also helped manage a complex mechanical system that powered the attraction. The ride's placement and two-building design also helped manage crowd flow within the park. By spreading the ride across multiple areas, it ensured guests move through critter country rather than bottlenecking into one spot. It was an architectural dance of space and storytelling and logistics that made Splash Mountain feel far larger and far more impressive than it actually was. But the real stroke of genius is what happened on the outside. While guests were waiting in line, they could catch glimpses of logs dropping folks down a 52-foot waterfall. This wasn't just a random design element. It was a deliberate design choice to build anticipation, to heighten the sense of excitement. And it's the moment watching the logs plunge that made waiting in line part of the adventure itself. Splash Mountain is a masterclass in immersive ride design that slowly builds anticipation. Similar to the Blue Bayou scene in Pirates of the Caribbean, the first part of Splash Mountain uses its environment to set the mood. As guests float along, they're surrounded by the sights and sounds of Brer Rabbit's world. The gentle music, rustic scenery, and calm waters create a sense of relaxation, fooling riders into a false sense of security. But here's where the magic of design kicks in. As the logs round Chickapin Hill, guests get a glimpse of what's to come. They can see other logs plummeting down the final drop. It's a psychological trick Imagineers use to build excitement and tension, priming guests for big moments that lie ahead. And this buildup is no accident. The ride is carefully placed to take guests from a calm, almost whimsical journey through Brer Rabbit's world into a gradual sense of unease and danger. The music subtly shifts and the scenery around you changes, from bright and cheerful to dark and foreboding. It's a slow climb of anxiety that perfectly mirrors the ride's ascent towards the final drop. Disney has perfected the peaks and valleys of storytelling, constantly cycling between calm moments and bursts of adventure. In Splash Mountain, each calm moment becomes more relaxing, drawing you deeper into the story, while each adventure sequence ramps up the excitement time and time again. By the time the logs approach the last climb, guests are on the edge of their logs, and the anticipation has been building for minutes, and it all culminates in that one heart-pounding 52-foot plunge into the briar patch. The design strategy is what makes Splash Mountain more than just a flume ride. It's a carefully crafted experience that draws you in and plays with your emotions and leaves you wanting more. And one of the most unique aspects of Splash Mountain's design is how it ditches the traditional walls that typically divide show scenes. Inside the show buildings, Imagineers crafted the ride to be an open environment, allowing guests to have a view across the entire bayou without giving away the future storyline. And this open layout creates a sense of vastness. As you float along, you can see glimpses of what's coming, whether it's the cheerful critters in the Brer Rabbit's Laughing Place or darker corners of the mountain, but nothing is revealed, keeping a narrative of suspense alive as you journey through each scene. Unlike Pirates of the Caribbean, where most of the action unfolds at a distance, and you constantly go through keyholes that resets each and every act of the story, Splash Mountain pulls you right into the middle of the story. The scenes are up close and personal, almost like you're there and it's happening just for you. It's an immersive approach that makes you feel like an active participant in Brer Rabbit's adventure, not just a spectator. This is kind of why the ride was so popular. It had stakes. And this close action was an intentional choice by the Imagineers. They wanted every rider to feel directly involved, as if they were right alongside Brer Rabbit, narrowly escaping Brer Fox and Brer Bear's traps. By removing barriers and placing guests in the thick of the storyline, Splash Mountain transforms from a mere ride to a truly engaging adventure. Splash Mountain featured a staggering 103 animatronics, and most of them came directly from America Sings. And for other critters that didn't fit, they found a home for them on the show's finale riverboat scene. That's where all of that came from. It was a creative way to tie up all the loose ends while making the climactic moment even more grand. The entire set was almost entirely made of cement. And you ask yourself, why cement? Cement could stand up to the damp and wet environment created by the water flume. Traditional materials, like wood or fiberglass, would have struggled with the constant exposure to the water. But cement offered both durability and flexibility. This design choice meant that the attraction could be built faster and would be easier to maintain in the long run, giving Splash Mountain its lifelike texture while ensuring it could last for decades. And it did. Disneyland had ambitious plans for Splash Mountain. They wanted the flume ride to break the mold, not only moving logs fast, but also keeping guests mostly dry. So much for that. It was a bold vision, but it came with a set of technical challenges the park had not faced before. This was their first ever thrill water ride. To tackle these challenges, Disney brought in New Hampshire-based O.D. Hopkins, one of the premier builders of flume rides. But meeting Disney's unique requirements was no easy feat. The design called for the logs that would move swiftly down a series of drops, all while maintaining the illusion and calm of a river journey and keeping the splashing to a minimum. Yeah, once again, they failed that. Splash Mountain turned out to be a complicated dance of engineering and design, and things didn't go smoothly. Adjustments were constantly needed at every step to meet the park's high standards, and the constant changes caused the budget to spiral way out of control. What started out to be a $20 million project soon had a balance of over $70 million. 70 million 1980s dollars. And if that wasn't enough pressure, there was a looming deadline. A cross-promotion with McDonald's had been scheduled for February of 1989, putting Imagineers on the clock to get the ride finished. Every day of the delay wasn't just costing Disney more money, it was also risking the success of a major promotional event that had been in the works for months. But despite technical setbacks and skyrocketing budget, the Imagineers never lost sight of the story that they wanted to tell. Every challenge they faced only pushed them to innovate further and refining the ride into something that had never been seen before. How did they bring it all together to create an unforgettable experience that guests know today? What choices did they make to transform a technical marvel into a ride brimming with heart and nostalgia? And all while Disney succeeded in building an incredible ride, they did build it around a story that eventually would stir up so much controversy. What started as pure fun would later become one of Disneyland's most debated attractions, putting Splash Mountain at the center of a storm that no one saw coming in 1989. But with the arrival of Splash Mountain, the area needed a transformation to fit the new theme. So Bear Country was reimagined as Critter Country. The name change was inspired by a quote from Uncle Remus in Song of the South, back when the critters were closer to the folks were closer to the critters. This idea of harmony between animals and people fit perfectly with the whimsical world that Splash Mountain would bring to the park. But as part of the re-theme, nearly every corner of the land received a makeover. The Indian Trading Post was rebranded as the Briar Patch, giving a nod to Brer Rabbit and his famous hideout. The Wilderness Outpost became the Crocodile Mercantile, and the mile-long bar was transformed into the Brer Bar. But these changes weren't just cosmetic. To make room for the new attraction, Imagineers removed the restrooms behind the facade of George E. Russell Co. Mine Brokers and Miners Union. I have seen photos of this before, and I always wondered, Where exactly was this? That's why I love digging deep. You find out all kinds of little pearls. Then they built new ones on the lower level of the Hungry Bear restaurant. This careful planning ensured that Critter Country not only looked different, but also could accommodate the expected increase of visitors. Every detail of this transformation was designed to support the story of Critter Country. It was a subtle yet significant shift to set the stage for Splash Mountain's grand entrance. Not too different than the setting of the stage that's happening behind me. Splash Mountain's storyline pulls from several of Brer Rabbit's tales, focusing mainly on Brer Rabbit Runs Away. The story begins with Brer Rabbit leaving his home in search of adventure, despite warnings from his friends. This sets up a journey that takes guests through various scenes inspired by the world of Song of the South. And all along the way, guests float past iconic locations like the old mill, the bog, and the swimming hole. Each scene is meticulously detailed, bringing to life the rustic charm of Brer Rabbit's world. One of the ride's most memorable moments is the psychedelic laughing place, where guests are surrounded by swirling colors, mischievous critters that is pretty trippy and surreal. And all of this builds up to the grand finale, the famous 53-foot plunge into Briar Patch. It's a heart-pounding drop that gives guests a taste of Brer Rabbit's wild escape from Brer Fox and Brer Bear. The thrill of descent is followed by a sense of celebration as riders enter the final scene. Greeted by dozens of singing critters on a riverboat, it's here that Zippity-Doo-Dah fills the air, reminding everyone of the joy and comfort of returning back home to those that love you. But here's the bittersweet truth. Splash Mountain is for most guests their only encounter with Song of the South. Tony Baxter openly admitted this, and I get it. The ride captures a very small piece of the film's story, but it leaves out so much more depth and social context, making it a strange twist of fate that this thrilling water ride is how most Disney fans have come to know this very obscure and yes, very controversial Disney film. Disney parks were evolving, and the team wanted to make sure that every story they told in the parks reflected the world that we live in today. This new direction sparked discussions about retheming certain attractions to better align with modern values and represent more diverse stories. And Splash Mountain, with its roots to the very controversial Song of the South, was on the forefront of these conversations. Probably was the one that started the conversations, to be honest. And I'm sure it wasn't an easy decision. Splash Mountain had become a beloved classic, but there was a growing awareness that the story didn't quite fit with Disney's goal for inclusivity. The Imagineers wanted to create an experience that would resonate with everyone who visited the park, and that meant looking at new ways to bring fresh and diverse narratives into the spotlight. While the decision to retheme Splash Mountain seemed to come suddenly, it had actually been in development behind the scenes for years. Imagineers have been considering a new storyline going back to 2016. They knew reimagining needed to honor Disney's commitment to inclusivity while also bringing something fresh and relevant to the park. And this just wasn't a casual discussion amongst the creative team. Top Disney executives, including Bob Iger, Josh D'Amaro, and others were deeply involved in the decision-making process. Now, the public announcement was made 4 years later, June 25th, 2020, a time when conversations about inclusivity and representation were at the forefront. The plan they came up with was to replace Song of the South's theming with characters from Princess and the Frog featuring Princess Tiana. The announcement was met with a lot of reactions. Now, the decision to retheme Splash Mountain with the Princess and the Frog wasn't just about updating the story. It also makes somewhat geographic sense. The attraction at Disneyland sits right next to New Orleans Square, seamlessly tying it into the rich atmosphere of this area. By setting the story in the bayous of Louisiana, Imagineers could make this transition feel more natural, as if it was always meant to be part of the park. And the new storyline picks up after the movie's conclusion, following Princess Tiana and her alligator friend, Louis, as they head to a Mardi Gras concert. It's a fresh take that allows a ride to move beyond the film's plot while still staying true to its characters and setting. This choice also opens up opportunities to introduce new scenes and elements that celebrate New Orleans culture and its unique spirit. Now, a stylistic change from the new version to the old. On the old version, you were right there in the adventure with Brer Rabbit, but you were never acknowledged. On the new version of the attraction, Tiana and her friends will address the guests, drawing you into the story. As they prepare for a concert, it's a creative workaround that aligns perfectly with Disney's evolving approach to storytelling and creating a ride that resonates with visitors from all walks of life. The reimagining of Splash Mountain has a brand new creative vision led by Sharita Carter. Carter brings a fresh perspective to the project, and while she's made it clear, the new version is going to be about so much more than just that big drop. Her vision for the attraction is all about enhancing the storytelling and musical elements. She's focused on creating an experience where music isn't just a backdrop, it's an active character in the story. And as we all float along, we'll be surrounded by an evolving landscape and soundscape that guides the narrative, amplifies the emotions, and draws us into Tiana's world. Carter's approach is designed to make every moment of the ride feel like part of the story. She's attempting to elevate the theme to create a cohesive journey that celebrates the spirit and culture of New Orleans in a way that will resonate with today's audience. And obviously at the heart of this new adventure is the retheming around Princess Tiana, a character who represents much more than just a Disney princess. Tiana is an African-American woman with a fierce entrepreneurial mindset, a deep kindness, and a genuine desire to see her friends succeed. Her story just isn't about dreams and magic, it's about hard work, determination, and the belief that you can create your own success. The new ride will highlight these qualities, showing guests that Tiana's journey is one of resilience, friendship, and the joy of bringing people together. In reimagining Splash Mountain, Disney is embracing Tiana's spirit and her values, creating an experience that not only entertains, but also celebrates diversity and the idea that everyone has the power to make their dreams come true, which is a classic Disney storyline. And the retheming of Splash Mountain, it isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a broader shift in how Disney approaches its classic attractions. We've seen similar updates with other rides like the recent changes to the Jungle Cruise, where Disney addressed the outdated cultural depictions to make the experience more inclusive. And although somehow controversial to some, these updates show Disney's commitment to creating parks that reflect the diverse world that we live in today. By reimagining attractions like Splash Mountain and the Jungle Cruise, Disney is making sure that the stories that they tell aren't just timeless, but also respectful and relevant to all of its guests. And this is just the beginning. It's a clear sign of the direction Disney is heading, a future where everyone can find themselves reflected in the stories and in the magic of their parks. The new version of Splash Mountain, admittedly, it trades the thrill of chase and the high stakes of the original attraction for a softer, more relaxed story. This time, it's less about escaping danger and more about heading to a party with friends. How will that resonate with fans for generations to come? Only the future knows. But currently, it has been met with mixed reviews because it's a different kind of experience, filled with music, friendly characters, and a positive vibe. But here's the reality. This new version may be just as controversial as the decision to change it itself, especially for adults and those who remember the original ride. Because the new version, it's a different kind of ride. I rode the one out at Walt Disney World. It's an experience filled with music, friendly characters, and a positive vibe, but does miss the thrill. However, for the next generation and the future citizens of Disneyland, Tiana's Bayou Adventure will simply be known as the Party Ride, a place where they all hear catchy tunes, meet fun characters, bop their heads to the beat, and yes, get a little bit wet along the way. And as time passes, the tale of Splash Mountain, much like Song of the South, will fade as a distant memory, a piece of Disney history that many future guests will never know. Friends, if you want to see the last day of the original Splash Mountain at Disneyland, check out this documentary right here. It's a unique look at a memorable end of era at the park. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you.